Hello, I'm a man in my late 30s, married with one child. Currently, I'm running a small cafe in a rural area on the outskirts. My wife and child still live in the metropolitan area, so we've been living as a weekend couple for almost a year now. Before moving here, I was just an ordinary office worker. My dream was to achieve financial independence early, earn enough to invest, and live a moderately enjoyable life. Unexpectedly, our child came into our lives when we were living as a dinked double income. No kids couple, and that completely changed my plans. Though it wasn't by choice, my daughter is now my greatest treasure. I finally understand what it means when people say they love someone so much they wouldn't feel pain if they were in their eyes. Ironically, striving to achieve my dream of financial independence became even harder. I worked hard and focused solely on promotions until I hit burnout. I was so burned out, I was almost depressed. That's when I started dreaming of buying a quiet country house to make memories with my daughter. It might have been impulsive, but I began seriously looking at houses. About a year ago, I found a property in this village, about an hour away from our main house. It was a fairly large two-story commercial building at the entrance of a road, with a few houses scattered around. It used to be a supermarket, but had been left unused for a long time. So, without ever having learned how to brew coffee, I decided to buy the house and start a cafe. My wife was scared, telling me I was making hasty decisions and that I'd surely regret it, but I was actually excited. Every weekend, I went down there to work on setting up the cafe and renovating the second floor living space. My wife wasn't thrilled about suddenly having to live in the countryside, but she left me to it since I was so depressed. We decided to try living there first, renting out our main house instead of selling it. As I was preparing for our gradual move, my wife suddenly got promoted. She received an offer with excellent terms, making it impossible for her to quit. Since my wife couldn't move, my daughter refused to come along, so I decided to live there by myself. I had already quit my job and was fully committed to starting the cafe. The village, mostly inhabited by seniors in their 60s, lacked even a proper cafe, only having a small grocery store. So, I thought the business might do well. I began living in the countryside during the weekdays, tending to the cafe primarily frequented by seniors, busy with farming and livestock during the day, and returning to my family over the weekends. The first few months, the business was booming. The area, with its orchards and farms, had an elderly population of mostly people in their 50s to 70s, and the rest were mostly foreign workers. Whether they needed a break from farming or just wanted a cool drink, they all came to my cafe. Being the new young man in town worked in my favor. For a few months, my income was even better than when I was working a corporate job. This was because people didn't hesitate to buy 20, 30 drinks at a time for their workers. The pricing was very affordable, aimed at volume sales, so the profit margin wasn't huge after deducting the cost of goods sold. There were peak times when business was bustling, but outside of those, it was pretty quiet. The elderly customers preferred not to sit inside for long. Except for the busy times, I had plenty of free time, often just watching TV or lazing around. After over a decade of the corporate grind, this break felt like heaven. However, after living like this for 34 months, I encountered a problem. It was quite challenging living alone as a man. Honestly, sometimes traveling to see my family every week felt burdensome, So on average, I ended up seeing them once every 2 weeks. Whether I went up to our home or my wife and daughter came down, we always ended up sleeping together. There was no time for my wife and me to even hold hands after playing with my daughter until she fell asleep. We'd all end up going to bed at the same time, being in a small countryside village. Surrounded mostly by the elderly, I often felt lonely at night. Living like this, all sorts of thoughts started crossing my mind. I found myself glancing at women in their 50s, a decade older than me, especially when they wore tight-fitting shirts. Sometimes, the more attractive ladies in the village started to look pretty good to me, even though they weren't my usual type. One day, a lady in her early 50s, who seemed younger than the rest, jokingly asked me if I had been working out, saying I had a better body than her husband, who works in the fields. Normally, I would have been shocked by such a comment, but by that point, I had adopted a whatever attitude. So I started showing off my arm muscles by rolling up my sleeves and subtly flirting back. The ladies seemed to enjoy my showmanship, their eyes lighting up every time I flexed. "Oh my, look at those muscles," they'd say, complimenting my physique. Among these ladies, there was one in her early 50s, whom I'll call Emily, who joked around in a way that left me awkwardly smiling. Emily then playfully asked if I was feeling very lonely, adding, "What do you think about me?" in a teasing manner. I responded with a joke of my own, but she didn't reply. I glanced at her, worried I might have offended her. But instead of looking upset, she seemed embarrassed. Sitting next to me, she acted awkwardly. But it didn't seem like she was uncomfortable or displeased with my presence. In a moment of impulse, I grabbed Emily's hand and headed out the back door, going up to my apartment on the second floor. Emily, while protesting with a "Really now? What if someone sees us?" didn't try to pull her hand away and followed me willingly. Eventually, we ended up in my room, and I got her to lie down on the bed. First thing, I drew the curtains closed, wary of prying eyes. Emily was voluptuous, despite her age, and the fact that she had some belly fat and thicker thighs. I found her quite attractive. We had a great time together, but Emily seemed hesitant to leave, resulting in us spending a few more hours together with the cafe door left wide open. Lying there afterward, I suddenly felt a wave of reality hit me, thinking, what have I just done? A flood of thoughts rushed in, leaving me feeling somewhat pathetic. Considering a bit more age difference, and she could have been my mother's age. Emily, seeming drained, barely managed to get up, tidy herself, and adjust her clothes. Then she told me, "Let's keep what happened today between us, okay?" I replied, "Don't worry. Who would I even tell?" Emily carefully opened the door, went down the stairs, and hurried home, taking a long way around the back of the cafe. As she left, she joked, "How am I going to face you after this? So embarrassing," and laughed. I went back to the cafe, sold a few more cups of coffee, tidied up the place, and then headed home. That evening, as I was having a simple dinner, Emily showed up at my place again, saying, "I made some delicious side dishes for dinner. Come and have a taste," and walked right in, arranging things in the fridge. Watching her, I thought, she's come all this way with an excuse. I can't just send her away. And so we ended up having another enjoyable time together. Since that day, Emily stopped visiting our cafe as frequently. Instead, she'd come up to our place on the second floor, with the excuse of bringing side dishes or fruit whenever she felt like it. I didn't mind it, so I kept accepting her visits. However, a woman slightly younger than Emily started coming to our cafe regularly. She looked completely different from Emily. While Emily had an average face with a voluptuous figure, this woman had a clear complexion. She looked like she had soft skin, probably from not doing much field work, and had a gentle face. Then she found out about my close relationship with Emily, including the frequent visits and the exchange of side dishes. I talked about it openly, but she started giving me these suggestive looks. When I asked her why, she'd just play it off coyly, saying, "Oh, it's nothing." She'd hang around me while I was cleaning the cafe, trying to make small talk, and it was clear she was interested in me. She seemed to have caught on that. Emily and I were spending pleasant times together under the guise of exchanging side dishes. I'm thinking about pursuing a meeting with her too, like I did with Emily. She's been flirting with me, making meaningful comments as if to say, "How long are you going to wait?" Honestly, by now, I've started to think that I could probably have a chance with some of the more attractive women in this town if I wanted to. Of course, spending enjoyable times with these women isn't something I brag about to my friends. Lately, I've been hoping my wife and daughter wouldn't come down from the countryside, so I diligently go back to our main house. I feel guilty and embarrassed about my wife and daughter staying in a space where I've been with other women. Yet, I'm not sure when we'll give up country living and return to the city. It feels awkward to suddenly end this lifestyle and go back to living like good neighbors and relatives. Honestly, moving to the countryside has given me a chance to experience things I never could have imagined in my lifetime, and I've been incredibly happy. It's almost cured the depression I had while working. Who would have thought at my age I'd be doing all this with women in their 50s? It somehow makes it easier to live more freely.